Let's talk about female genital mutilation. Why? A new report from UNICEF suggests that the number of FGM survivors now exceeds 230 million worldwide, with most living in Africa. That represents an increase of 15% since 2016, despite progress against the practice in some countries. Lead author of the report, released to coincide with the International Women's Day on Friday, Claudia Coppa, said this is a huge number, a number that is bigger than ever before. According to the survey of 31 countries where the practice is common, Africa is home to the most number of FGM survivors, with more than 144 million, ahead of Asia with 80 million and the Middle East with 6 million. The overall increase is largely due to population growth in certain countries, but the report highlighted progress in reducing its prevalence in other places. To discuss FGM, the progress made and the challenges still ahead, I have with me Shola Fagorusi, Executive Director, One Life Initiative. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you for having me as well.
All right. I still remember the training we had so many years ago on female genital mutilation. It stays with me today, but it doesn't seem to, things doesn't seem to have changed that much, has it? What is FGM and where are we? What is the current situation regarding this in Africa?
Okay, so female genital mutilation, for those hearing about this for the first time, is what we generally also and traditionally call female circumcision. We're referring to the total or partial removal of all or part of the external female genitalia, and it's usually done for cultural and for non-medical reasons, which means that if any parts or all parts of the external female genitalia is being touched by individuals, and it's not based on medical recommendation, it's based on a perceived or a believed culture, then we're talking about female genital mutilation. Interestingly, we were part of the international, conference on female genital mutilation that held in Tanzania. I think that was October this year. And, we saw what was going on in terms of perspective from various African countries, individuals, countries who were using different approach. There were those who were, going to, at least from the male-led, perspective. We had countries like Nigeria where we had infused programming into some, into several of our, regular sexual and reproductive health and right programs. We also had a major shift, which was, the survival-led approach to say, look, how do we also get women who are survivors to be at the forefront? Here in Nigeria, we've had to set up survival networks. One of them, was a network that we had to, work on, in your state with on a UNICEF project. And one of the things we had to do was to also get stories of women and use those stories to drive change. Interestingly, today, we're at a community where we're trying to get feedback from some of the work we're doing. And we saw how, our initiative towards actually getting younger people in secondary school also is beginning to drive changes. We had a boy in a school who went home, found that, told the teacher, came back to school, the teacher who had, shared information with them to say, look, this is what is going to happen to my sister. I know that we have this culture within my family. Can you please come talk to the parents? And interestingly, that changed the narrative. We've also had, our own fair share of, sad narratives. We brought a survival group together. The woman came into the room with a baby, and she clearly was telling us that 2, months before that period, she had mutilated the girl child. So it looks like we're putting out a lot of information, and it still looks as though this very massive, size information is not getting to every nook and cranny. But look, we've been able to, reach some milestones in terms of, media platforms like yourself have been able to support with radio, television, but it looks like there's still so much to be done. And we understand this because we're coming from the perspective of tradition. We've seen professors who have held on to this practice. We've seen medical professionals, nurses, community health extension workers, even doctors, sometimes who have held on to this practice in the name of culture. A woman was also telling us today how, the community she visited, we have what we call the community-based child protection structure. So we're having a review meeting with them earlier today. And she said one of the communities she went into, the woman she talked to said, look, our tradition is that if you don't do this to the child will die. right? We've also had the narratives of women who have said, who have come out, women in their 50s who have gone past reproductive age, who have been able to say, look, even though I'm 50, I'm 60, I am not promiscuous, I was not mutilated. So all your theories about this actually happening, this narrative, because of the reason that tradition is being given, does not hold. So we're using different approaches. We're using the playbook. We're using the gender box. We're using different approaches just to get people's stories out. And we're using these stories as a medium, as a platform to actually drive changes as well.
I mean, without question, a lot of work has been done when it comes to creating awareness on the dangers around FGM. But for the benefit of those who might be watching today and are yet to grasp the implication of discontinued practice, I want you to talk to us about some of the major consequences or health risks associated with FGM practice.
Okay, so very clearly, for the benefit of those who haven't, who don't understand what this is about, the first impression is to think that, look, you are talking about a practice that is old, gone, and is no longer an issue. So I don't understand why you're making an issue out of this. But let me say very clearly that unfortunately, the data set we have from, the NDHS 2023, 2018 is telling us very clearly that the prevalence is even more in urban centers, which acts as, melting point for culture. So we're talking about a practice that people hold on to, and because we don't actually discuss sexuality, it's not even our tradition, it's not part of our culture. Parents even find it very difficult to give, the right comprehensive sexuality education to their, to their children, male and female. Mothers sometimes even find it difficult to talk about, menstruation. So you can imagine what it looks like when we're talking about, female genital mutilation. What we're saying in essence is that it is a practice that is barely talked about. And so because it happens in the bedroom, because it happens in the backyard, you may not know that this is actually happening at all. And, the way this happens is that we actually have various types. So we classify all of them despite the, numerous types as type 1, type 2, type 3, type 4. Type 1, we're talking about the nicking of the clitoris, and, that's what happens with type 1. Type 2, we're talking about removal of the clitoris. And, all or part of the labia, labia minora. Part 3, type 3 rather, we're talking about, the removal of the clitoris, the removal of the labia minora, and then, the stitching together of the, labia majora, sometimes even, totally removed, and then leaving just a little hole for urination, leaving just a little hole, for menstrual, products to actually come out as well. And then type 4 talks about every other thing we see done. In the southeastern part of the country, type 4, where people say they want to massage the clitoris. No, what you're doing is that you're deadening, the nerve, and it's a type of female genital mutilation. So the clitoris, which is about, 40-something times more sensitive than, the male, reproductive organ, is actually deadened. And that is type 4 female genital mutilation. Some people go as far as, even having scarifications there, having incisions there, on that part of the body. So that's type 4. But what we have very popular within the southeastern part of the country is type 4. What we have popular in the southwestern part of the country is the type 1 female genital mutilation. So it looks as though the woman's body is just experimental, so much so that we're talking about various classification. And then we have seen people who try to say, but this is the same thing as male circumcision. No, male circumcision, there are medical recommendations for male circumcision. You will never find a doctor in training, a nurse in training, who was taught, how to actually, mutilate the female child, who was taught to actually mutilate a woman. We've had cases that we've had to, refer to the Sexual Assault and Referral Center. We've had to work with different, partners just to make sure that, there were cases, International Day of Zero Tolerance. We had 2 women who called on the radio program to say, look, this has happened to me. Now I understand why exactly I don't feel, my libido is actually pretty low. I'm not saying this is the only reason, but she was able to pinpoint it to that and was asking us very clearly, what do I do now that I've been mutilated? So again, we're setting up Survivors Network. We're allowing people to actually even have interactions about this. We're allowing conversations about this flow to the surface. In one of the communities we're in, we even surprisingly found out from another source now that the clitoris sometimes, even after being cut, is sold, and used for traditional products, a number of things, that we can't be talking about, on air. But it was a troubling, revelation for us as well. So we're saying in essence that because of the health implications, even though there are laws around this, the health implications actually even points through which we drive this. Some persons can go into shock from the process and lose their lives. Some persons can get infections from the process. In the process of cutting, you remember the person cutting is not most times a trained medical practitioner, and they mistakenly cut the urethra, and then you have what is called VVF, vesical vaginal fistula, where the woman is not able to control, the girl child is not able to control urination. So what is done several times is that even before the reproductive cycle of the girl starts, it is ended. So what we always tell people who say, why are you having this conversation? It is not an issue. We tell them very clearly that, do you want to go back home and also have conversations within your household? You'll be shocked how this is an issue. You'll be shocked that, people even who have very rich worldviews still hold on to this practice as well. This is not something just done in Africa. We have, people who actually also leave the African continent, go into Europe, and as a family of 5, family of 10, they come together, pay for a circumciser to come into the country they now reside on just to mutilate their girl child. They perceive this culture as very important.
That is actually moving backwards instead of moving forward. Amazing. Talk to us, please. The consequences are glaring for those who wish to really know about it. I want you to talk to us about initiatives, programs that have resulted in significant reduction of FGM cases that you think can be replicated. I know there is no one size fits all, but there are measures that have been taken, moves that has been successful. If you can share some of that with us.
Okay, awesome. One of those, initiatives is always around, getting religious leaders. We're also looking at, what do we have? What can we work with? We're working with religious leaders to let them know that when you counsel, ahead of weddings, intending couple, you mention to them that, look, you guys are going to get married. If you have a female child, this is what, you shouldn't do. That's one. Number two, we're also getting men involved. We did a training of, the Young Men's Network, against, sexual and gender-based violence. And I remember vividly how several of the men ran back home to go and ask their wives. One of them came back and he said, he decided, he heaved a sigh of relief when he found out that his wife, took a stand. But look, they didn't ask him at home. He didn't get involved in that conversation. And he said going forward, he would do that. So these days, we also tell religious leaders, when you go to the naming ceremonies of a girl child, because we found out that, the court happens 7-8 days after, the naming ceremony, after the child has been, put to bed, you go as well just before the naming ceremony to mention to them that, look, you can't do this. Mention to grandma, mention to grandpa. Remember that people who also do this don't do this because they despise the child, because they want to harm the child, right? They do this because they actually love the child. So religious leaders, male, led, approach to these. We're also engaging in terms of, survival approaches. We're using football, to actually do this as well. We had some work with, One Life, which I work with, had some work with Youth of Africa, and we had to do some work around, how do we use football as a means to actually, engender conversation. And then, we kept saying that the only loser, in this football competition was female genital mutilation. Of course, it was female genital mutilation. We've also had to, set up community-based child protection structures where we didn't just put issues of FGM alone on the table. We also had to onboard others. We had to involve the Ministry of Education. We had to involve the Ministry of Women Affairs. One of the other approaches to this also is to also use the media heavily, right? So we're using the media to also drive this. I'm also aware of individuals who are trying to also drive a caravan, across the length and breadth of the country as well. They're doing this across African countries, moving from different parts of the continent.
I really would love to let you, go on and expose more on some of the measures that has been taken. But I'm told we're out of time for this conversation. So I'll just, in wrapping up, I'd like you to speak to us individually in our personal capacity. What can we do to help protect women and girls, their rights from being violated in this way?
Okay, so first, which, I would ask everybody to do is to get informed about this, dig up, some content online around this, find out what it is. We also try to tell people that, look, the healthcare situation in the country is bad enough. We have doctors actually leaving the country, nurses in their numbers. You don't want to add this to the table of, health, issues that we want to deal with. It's better we're not even talking about, a girl being mutilated, right? We're not talking about this. We're dealing with other, health issues that, have, consequences coming from other things being done, not those ones that, were self-inflicted. So again, I want to, say to every man out there, get involved in this. I want to say to every mother or woman out there, speak about what the issues are. so that your story can actually be a major driver for change, in society as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for speaking with us. We appreciate your time and the work that you do. All right, that's where we wrap things up on One Slot today. We hope that there's been some information sharing that is worth your time. If so, join us again next week for more. I'm Felicity Ezewike. Bye for now.